right, welcome back to The Mentors. This is Vadim
and Sergey,
and this is a show where we tell stories of ordinary people that became extraordinary entrepreneurs despite lack of experience, money, or connections.
And we have a gentleman here today with us, Wayne Mackey of Statespace, who has a very intriguing story, very unlike anything that we've heard. Vadim and I love to talk about how most entrepreneurs that we meet who are successful entrepreneurs actually either didn't have experience in the field that they were starting off before, or they just kind of jumped in and this is the first time they've been an entrepreneur. And for Wayne, I think he's been an entrepreneur for a long time in the making. But I want to go back in time a little bit here because I think you have a pretty interesting story that actually even led you to New York, because you're not really a city boy. You're from you're from a town in Ohio. Tell us about your upbringing there, because I don't think it was obvious that you were going to be a PhD in neuroscience and start a company around that afterwards.
No, my high school teachers, probably if they were to find out I have a PhD in neuroscience, would be like, no, not that guy. I thought he'd be in jail or something. I don't know by now, but not neuroscientist / startup CEO. But yeah, so I'm originally from Youngstown, Ohio, which is a small, it's a city, but not like New York City, but it's a small, city, the kind of Youngstown, Warren area. There's a bunch of little towns around there. We all kind of condense into one thing when talking to people not from there, at least. But yeah, I grew up there. It was a big steel town. The 80s came and, the steel went away and, led us into kind of, economic depression that to this day, sadly, our city has not really grown out of. And you see, in the news now, like the stuff about the GM plant in Lordstown shutting down and stuff like that, right? That's right around the corner and was, who employed, one of the biggest employers in the area. But that's what a lot of the jobs were. It's a lot of factory jobs, a lot of manufacturing jobs. And I remember my grandfather, when I was growing up, was like, it's just not like it was for you kids now. For my grandfather in high school, he was making more money than his teachers, he would say. And, he went to school and then he went to work in the mill. He had a job for life as long as he kind of showed up. And, around there, that's what everything was about. It was just about kind of, hard work, showing up every day and kind of putting in everything that you had. So, regardless of not necessarily having a very technical upbringing in the beginning, one thing that we do really have there is that just kind of a grinder mentality, a kind of a hustle mentality, really, really hard work. And that's something that, I was fortunate enough to have family and just a community of that instills those values in you that I think, is super important and is really what has helped kind of lead me to where I am today. But yeah, Youngstown, lately we haven't been famous for a ton of stuff. We have, a lot of some athletes, some pro boxers and stuff like that, and football players. We had, number one homicide rate per capita in the U.S. for a little bit. We had a recently highest concentration of poverty in the U.S. So, not known for much. All of this is basically to say, as I was growing up, college wasn't something I really, really thought about. So, my parents didn't go to college, my grandparents, it just wasn't kind of a thing. But I really, really loved video games. Probably more than I should have. Over the years I've lost, jobs and relationships probably from playing too many video games. But, college wasn't really an option. So high school, I was terrible. I barely graduated high school. I finished with a stellar 1.9 GPA. So
even though you had kind of a hard worker mentality from the upbringing that you had, still high school wasn't really for you. Why did your teacher think that you would end up in jail? So there's got to be something there.
I think it was really boring. I was the disruptive kid. I was really, really bored. In elementary school, they'd ask my parents, are like, this kid's bored, you should skip him a grade. But I actually, another kind of weird Wayne fact, I didn't hit 5 feet tall till I was in like 11th grade in high school. I was really, really tiny. They like tested me for growth deficiencies and I was growing up to like, I don't know why this dude is so small. So my parents were like, no, he's already like the tiny kid in class. We don't want him to be like the tinier kid in a larger class. I think I was really, really bored and just didn't see the purpose. I didn't think math and science were cool. I thought they were useless and stupid, and I didn't care about the kind of things that I was being taught. Okay, if 2 trains leave a station at these times at these speeds, like I was like, who cares? Why does this matter? And a lot of kids, I have younger cousins and family members now. They say the same thing, like, why do I need this crap? Why do I need math or anything like that? Because you don't really see the use of it, maybe necessarily in the time, just from like math textbooks and science textbooks. You're like, why should I care about this? So for me, it was, I think it was just didn't care. And I put that hard work into other things. So, I loved video games, and I thought I want to make my own video games. So like 8th, 9th grade, I started teaching myself how to code. And that's really what I became obsessed with a lot through high school. So, this was before Coursera and the internet, really, where you could, learn how to code through some sort of online class. And it was more like decompiling software and trying to break things and put it back together, and like AOL 2.5 hacking programs and stuff like that. That was kind of where I got my start, and I was just fascinated. I loved it. Like the idea that I could build something that like worked and did things, I was fascinated. And even in school, I remember sitting there writing like Visual Basic code in my notebooks, and like I can't wait to go home and like type this in and see like I was like just obsessed with it. I completely fell in love. It was.
How did you get exposed to it at such a young age?
And was it even normal to have a computer, like a personal computer at home?
Yeah, so it was. I didn't have one until high school, till it was like until 9th grade, and I was just obsessed with it. I thought it was like amazing. But I think really I cared about computers because I cared about gaming and like Nintendo and stuff. And I was like, oh, I want to make my own. How do you do that? I just was like, man, I have all these ideas. These games could be so much better if you could do this or that, or I wish I could do this or that. So I think that's really what led me to even taking an interest in coding and computers, was really because I could make video games. And along the way, I learned you could do other useful things with computers other than build video games. But I think that was probably the start. And yeah, it was dial-up internet, 14.4 connection. So there were definitely times where I remember coming home and just sitting, waiting for like hours. Like AOL used to have the like little waiting beep. You'd like dial up and it'd be like, and like, I would sit there for like hours, like just trying to get a connection to AOL. I was also terrible. Some of these things maybe I shouldn't admit, but like I was really into hacking and just like stuff like that. So that also kind of helped get my start on being interested in code and what you could do with it.
What's the weirdest thing you did there? Did you like hack into the school's program and change?
No. But we would do like stuff that really isn't that even cool today. Like, I remember on AOL there were like internal accounts that you could get. So a lot of it was just like password sniffers or like engineering to get other people's accounts, and then you could create accounts off of that. But like AOL internal accounts were like gold, because I remember one of the reasons we wanted them because you could like scroll in chat. There was no limit. Like otherwise it would like rate limit you. So you could do these macros where it could be like spirals in text, like scrolling down. You could just kind of be annoying, I guess was what it was. But it was more of like, oh, I could do this. Like, I'm like, 13 years old and I can do this. I think it was more pushing those limits that was just really, really fascinating. That I think for me in general was a longer learning experience maybe than most, but like taking off those ceilings that you put on yourself or that you think exist that really don't. And I think that was just another small like microcosm of that. But like, a computer kind of taught me that some of these limits and things that I didn't know that I could even do, I could do. And then over time, there just became more of those small examples that built that kind of, I think, built my confidence and eventually tore down that ceiling of just like, you're going to work in a factory. You're going to work in these things. You can't go to college. You can't do these things. And eventually gathered enough evidence along the way that made me confident in going against the grain.
But what happened when you graduated high school? Because you said at this point you still didn't think college was...
No. So I graduated high school and I just went to work. That was kind of what everybody did. You went and you got a job. I worked various jobs. So everything from working in a plastics plant to waiting tables to the longest thing I did was probably like sales and sales management, business and sales management, probably a total of about 11 to 12 years.
Oh, wow. What kind of sales manager was it? I think you mentioned it was a car dealership. Was that?
So I did sell cars in car sales management, retail sales management. My first job was like in a call center where we were the super annoying people that would cold call you and ask for like donations and stuff like that. In the beginning I was really interested because, it was for like raising money for like disabled veterans or like firefighters and police officers and stuff like that. And I thought, oh, this is like a noble, cool thing to do. I realized that like they only got to keep like 3% of what we raised. It was kind of it was crazy. But that's actually where I got my first management job. I started out as a caller, and just because of the high turnover and stuff like that, I became a manager after like 6 weeks, which was crazy, but it was it was awesome. It was fun, and getting a taste of that. I think it was something I just really enjoyed like working with people. putting them in a team and kind of supporting them and helping them solve their own problems. I just really, really thoroughly enjoyed that. And I think I got more satisfaction out of that than like solving my own problems. I think it just felt much more rewarding, and found it a bit more challenging, and just really liked that. So I think that's why I kept on with the sales management stuff. I just really enjoyed kind of working in that team environment, hiring people and helping, teach, train them and help them grow and whatever it is that they wanted to do. And that's one of those things that in my life before being a founder definitely was very helpful for the position that I'm in now. It feels just very natural, and I learned a lot of things the hard way that I think give me a unique skill set as a founder now without much experience, that allow us to do some things that are a bit contrarian in our approach to how we do things at the company, that I think have allowed us to get where we are as an early stage company.
And so what was the turning point for you? Because you're doing these jobs for better part of 10, 11 years, and you're enjoying some of them not so much, but all the while you have this sort of sleeper skill set in the background that could actually make you probably a ton more money and have more potential, yet you didn't really make that connection. So when did you make the connection that, as an engineer, that could be a career path for you, that could lead to other things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a bunch of small things that just, I really ended up being driven by spite. Really, which is a very powerful motivator. So I think it was, I actually, so you guys can see, but other people probably obviously can't see because it's a podcast, but I'm covered in tattoos, and maybe I remember, I also had like really long hair. I remember I applied for a job at Office Max when I was like 19 years old. They were like, great, but you have to cut your hair is too long. I'm like, okay, this is weird. You want me to stock shelves? Who cares? And I was like, no, so I'm not going to take that job. Eventually ended up like shaving my head anyway because it was just too hot outside one day. I was like, this is enough. I got tired of being confused for Hanson when I went out in public.
And you do have a Hanson vibe.
No, I got asked for my autograph at like Subway, Pizza Hut. Yeah, like it was severe. Like I really, really kind of like looked like the lead singer from Hanson to a degree, and I was like in a metal band at the time, so that was like a big no-no. Like you can't be walking around looking like Hanson and then trying to be like, in a metal band. It was weird. So I think it was, so I got like, Office Max was like, no, you can't work here, you have long hair. I got fired from Applebees we had this weird policy for one time where we had to ask for 2 forms of ID to serve somebody alcohol. And I only asked for a driver's license and not 2 forms of ID, and was fired. I mean, this is crazy.
Wow.
And then I got tattoos on my hands and got fired from the Olive Garden. I was like a waiter there, and they're like, no, you got to go. We can't have this. It was just so crazy to me. And now I'm like, every time I go to an Olive Garden and see someone with tattoos, I'm like so proud and excited. Like, yeah, I helped pave the way for you. So I think like those experiences were just like, I think I felt like I deserved better, for one. I felt like, I'm a smart guy. I'm a really hardworking guy. I don't deserve to lose my job because, of these particular things, or because of the way I look or something. This is messed up. And I think a lot of it was just frustration of, going from sales job to sales job, or even sales management job to sales management job, working in the mall and seeing other people. I think, for better or worse, that's one of the things that broke down the ceiling for me of like, I think I grew up thinking college was like for the others. It was for people not us. It was for people that were smarter, people that had more, people that maybe came from a different background than we did. Those are the type of people that go to college. We go to work, and that's it. We're going to go work in a factory. We're going to do whatever. That's what we do, and that's fine. Like there wasn't anything wrong with that. We were very proud of that. But I didn't think that I was of the type of person that could go to college and be successful and kind of have that kind of a thing. But then also growing up and then seeing some other people who had gone to college and kind of work with people who had gone to college and then think, we're not so different. This person isn't much smarter than me. This person isn't like, why can't I do this? And, we talked kind of before we started recording, I did mixed martial arts and like fought competitively. And there's some terrible YouTube videos. You can see me, getting knocked out and knocking some people out. But that actually also taught me, about pushing the limits, is when you're sitting there training and you're like, getting beat on, or you're doing push-ups or skipping rope or something, and someone is pushing you past your physical limit, where you think, I can only do 5 more push-ups and that's it. That's all my body can handle. And someone else is, coaching you, letting you know that you're wrong, and saying, no, do 5 more. You think you can do 5, do 10 more, do 20 more. And then pushing you to do that, and you do it, you start realizing like, yeah, maybe a lot of these boundaries, they're just in my head. These are just like mental things I'm putting on myself. And it was just a culmination of all these little examples, piece by piece, over, 10 or 15 years, that made me go, you know what, this is crazy. Like, why can't I do these things? And I was 26. I started going to college, enrolled. It was funny, I enrolled at, first was ITT Tech. I went to ITT Tech for like one semester. It was horrible. I learned nothing. I think they're shut down now. Not surprising. But I had a cousin who went there. So I was like, oh, so maybe I could do that. He went there. We don't have to take stupid classes like math and science or something. We can just do computer stuff. I went there a semester. It was terrible. And so I went to Kent State University, a little local branch there. And they were like, well, we need your transcripts from ITT Tech. ITT Tech wouldn't release them. They're like, we'll let you go on like a semester for a provisional, semester. You can go for one semester, but we'll need your transcripts after that. So I went, I had straight A's. It was great. I couldn't get the transcripts from ITT. They wanted me to pay all this money. I'm like, this is crazy. And then Kent State kicked me out. They're like, no, it doesn't matter that you have a 4.0.
Wow.
We need these transcripts of these credits that wouldn't transfer anyway. It was kind of crazy. And I had a professor actually that was one of those other people that I think helped transform my life. He was an English professor and just stuck up for me. And he like went to the teachers and to the dean and to the administration, was like, this is crazy. He's one of the brightest students that we have. We're missing out on not letting him go here for some bullshit, basically some crap. Like, this is silly. He's a great student. He's very talented. They weren't having any of that. I'm still in touch with him to this day. I think that even having him stick up for me was the other little piece that I needed that was like, you know what, I do belong here. I can do this. I can do more than these limitations. Was having somebody, a professor stick up for me and say like, this is a bright kid that can do things. Like, you guys are sleeping on him. Why are you, this is kind of crazy. Having someone stick up for me like that, I think also gave me that extra push and drive that was like, man, I can do this, and help me believe in myself. I went to a community college instead. After that, I moved to Columbus, Ohio, so I could continue to go to school. I went to a community college. They didn't they didn't care about the ITT stuff, and I went there to kind of continue my education. I was a CS major, and I hated it. It was super, super boring to me because I had already been coding for like 15 years. So it was like, well, I don't want to make a calculator. This is boring.
You were a full-time student at this point?
So I was a full-time student, and I worked full-time, because I had to, and got a promotion and moved from Columbus, Ohio. I went to Philadelphia. And transferred to Temple University, which was great. And I worked there full-time in sales management positions in retail, and took my first neuroscience class there at Temple kind of by accident. I thought it would just be like a cool thing to take. I was like, I like, psychology and the mind, the brain. That sounds cool. And I just immediately fell in love. Like, first week of that class, changed my major. Again, I had an amazing professor there. She was super helpful and kind of helped turn me on to a lot of, what's cool about neuroscience. But I think as like from a CS perspective, and like as a computer scientist and someone who's, involved in coding, it was like, the brain was the ultimate computer. It was like the ultimate information processing system, but it was this weird, like, alien technology that we didn't understand, and people were trying to figure out. They were trying to like reverse engineer it, basically, which is the same way I taught myself how to code. So I was just fascinated. I completely fell in love, changed my major like the first week of that class. I joined, started doing research in the behavioral medicine department at Fox Chase Cancer Center with a colleague of that professor who taught that class, and then eventually joined that professor's lab, moved on to a neuroimaging lab where we're studying like, the early days of like brain training and stuff like that, computerized brain training, which I thought was super interesting, and doing like fMRI and stuff. At that point, honestly, I still didn't know what I really wanted to do. So I was like, maybe I want to be like a neurologist. At this point, I thought I want to continue to go to school. I either want to go to grad school, law school, or medical school. And I didn't know what I had a chance of getting in at. So I like took the LSATs. I was like, I think I could be a good lawyer. That sounds like something that would be cool. I started talking to a lot of doctors. I was like, maybe I want to be a neurologist or something. They like quickly convinced me of not doing that. Then, what I really, really loved was science at that point, was neuroscience. I just didn't think think I had a good chance at getting in because I had only done it for, a couple years. I didn't have any publications. I just didn't think I was that competitive. And, thankfully I was wrong. So I applied. I ended up not applying to anything but grad school programs. And I thought if I don't get in this first year, fine, I'll go get some more experience. And maybe I'll apply another year. I applied to like 7 schools, ended up getting in at 5 of them. And it was funny because in my interviews, they were not quiet about the fact that the reason I was there was because of my coding background. They were like, listen, we can teach the biology aspect. Like that's, there's books and there's things that we can teach. And, part of it is learning that along the way. It's much harder to teach engineering and coding to students who don't have that background. So, you being able to come in and kind of code things off of the bat, is kind of a big help to the lab. So, that was I'm so thankful that I learned that skill. It opened a lot of doors for me, even from a very young age. It was very valuable. So, I'm very thankful that I took the time to do that.
And so, but still, you're studying, you're taking classes, you fell in love with psychology and neuroscience, and you're developing that skill set. Yet you still didn't see yourself as a professional engineer in a way, or somebody that could be one.
I think that I just wanted to do more. What I liked about, so I did like experimental, but also a lot of theoretical, computational kind of neuroscience stuff where we treated the brain as a computer or machine, that, there's an input to this device, it performs some computation on it, and then we see some observable outcome. So treating the brain like a computer in interfacing it as if I'm an engineer, was one of the things I really liked. It was like being an engineer, but and a scientist at the same time and like working with this weird supercomputer. So I felt that was a more rewarding kind of, implementation of my engineering skill set, was to be able to, break ground and come up with new things in that sense and apply it to something I thought, and still think obviously is very important. And also I was obsessed with the discovery process. Like I loved that, we knew nothing about the brain. We know nothing about the brain. We're in the dark ages. And that wasn't scary to me. It was fascinating. It was like I could really contribute here and learn things that no one else could learn. Like, as my PhD, I think the coolest thing that I got to do was I found and got to name a new part of the brain. Like, that was amazing. And that's like a super cool thing I would have never thought, again, as a high school student. It's like, one day I could grow up to discover and name a part of the human brain. But I think I at that point I definitely still saw myself as being a professor and an academic and having my own lab. There's a people don't understand, there's also like a big entrepreneur aspect to that. I mean, you basically are running your own small business. You wake up, you decide what you want to work on, what's important. You have to get funding. Even getting your PhD, they're grooming you to kind of have that position, and you need to learn these skills. You need to think independently and critically and not rely on your mentor and your PhD advisor for your ideas and solving problems. And, a lot of the science aspect, again, I think primed me for the position that I'm in now and, starting a company. So having the background of like being, in management and working with people for 10 to 12 years, then having that critical kind of scientific mindset and approach and data-driven approach to problems, how we measure data in problems in things to identify problems and come up with best solutions. The idea of learning and listening to users and like taking in data and information before coming up with a solution does not seem foreign to me. That seems completely natural. So I think all of those things really, it was just the perfect confluence of like skills, interest, and timing. Here being in New York, which is amazing, that was another weird thing to adapt to, was, going from Youngstown, I had like a drowning in opportunity problem. In Youngstown, opportunity doesn't really exist. There are so many people that worked harder, that are smarter than me, that are still there. And the same thing, when I was in Philadelphia and things, there's so many other people that just weren't as fortunate as I am or had the opportunities that I am to be here, that could be here. So you're taught if an opportunity comes, you got to run through it. So going from like a scarcity of opportunity to coming to New York where there's so much opportunity, and especially, if you're a hard worker, you do a good job, it leads to more opportunity. I was just taking everything that came my way. It was like, here's opportunity, I got to run through it. And then you realize you can't really do that. You'll just be drowning in things, and there's too much to do. And balancing that was definitely a tough skill to learn in the beginning.
So then take us then to, you did your master's at NYU, you did your PhD. What was the PhD in?
Neuroscience. So I did my cognition and perception here at NYU.
at what point you're drowning in opportunity, which is a difficult thing for a lot of people, and especially a lot of young people who, you might be in a big city, you might be in a university where there's just a lot of potential jobs you could do or things you could be doing with your life that could be interesting. So how did you land on starting Statespace? Where did the idea of it come from, and how did you decide to go all in on that particular opportunity?
Yeah, it's definitely true. I mean, a lot of my colleagues, so obviously as a grad student and then even as a postdoc, you don't make much money. That's tough being here in New York, right? $40K a year. While I was in my PhD, I also did it. I was, very productive. I did it in 4 years. I got married and had 2 kids in those 4 years, which was another reason I had to get out and finish the PhD as quickly as possible so I could make a little bit more money. Kids in New York are not cheap. I stuck around and did a postdoc at NYU. I was fortunate enough to get funding from the Simons Foundation, from the National Science Foundation, while I was, a full-time academic. But yeah, a lot of my colleagues went off to become like data scientists. That was a big new thing here. It's like, oh, well, now they're making 120, 140K. I'm making 40K with a family here. There was that. I think that started to pry me away and think of what other things I could do other than, the academic path and a tenure track job, which, there's few of, and it's a small percentage that get them. So I think I was already in the mindset of thinking about other things, of what are my options and what do I want to do and what really makes me happy. I've always had that kind of entrepreneur mindset. I think, Surya, you're right, it's kind of been in my genes. In high school I kind of did things on the side. I had like a web design freelance company for like 20 years. I was always hustling and doing something. When I sold cars, I tried to develop a new way using software to sell cars instead of like as a salesman, because people hate salesmen. I was always kind of trying those things, so that kind of mindset was already there. When gaming really changed over the last even 5 to 7 years, and still was constantly playing games, and seeing the change, gaming growing up and being like a professional sport. As someone who grew up playing Mario, that seems so strange to me, but then so natural at the same time, and starting to see like professional coaches, team owners giving talks at like the MIT Sports Analytics conferences and stuff, and like talking about problems that they had. One of which was common that I kept seeing come up over and over was like they were looking for the analogs in gaming to what in traditional sports would be like how fast you could run, how high you could jump, how strong you could be. Not necessarily like how many points did LeBron score, against the Celtics last week, but what are the constituent fundamental skills that make you good at gaming? And I thought that was just so fascinating and an easy problem to solve as a neuroscientist, because I was like, well, this is a head-up sport. It's hand-eye coordination, it's decision making, it's cognition and perception, these kind of things that we've done, in the lab for years. And I think that was just so exciting, but I really sat on the idea for like 2 years. It happened, it kind of talked to some colleagues about it and stuff like that. I didn't think it was a serious enough thing to do to kind of like, okay, I'm on this path to become a professor. I have a wife and kids, can I put this to the side and go do this? I thought it was still not necessary. I thought it was a good idea. I didn't know that other people may or may not think it was a good idea. I ended up joining the startup competition here at NYU, the intervention competition. We applied in like the last 5 minutes. Honestly, we were like, sure, why not? Let's kind of do this. I thought it would be a fun experience, and just maybe see is this cool? Do people care? I think even at that point, I didn't think like, yeah, I'm going to do this now. It's going to be like the full-time thing, and it had a great experience. We ended up winning that competition. Learned a lot along the way. I think that was an eye-opening experience.
Was this just an idea at this point when you applied for the competition, or did you actually get something?
It was an idea when we applied, but then during the competition, I built up a demo to kind of show the idea and get people to kind of play it, start to be able to get some feedback, and also show that this was something we could build and not just a kind of an idea that I actually have the skills to do this, and this is something that we could put into the world and actually see if people care about beyond just being an idea. So we ended up winning that competition, got some advice to apply to like some accelerators, incubators around town, talked to some kind of early stage VCs, and thought, okay, let's go for it. After we got into some of the accelerators and stuff, and after we seen the interest, I think that was also validating. It's just like, okay, I don't just think this is a good idea. There's actually validation here that this is a good idea and that it's worth pursuing. And I loved it. I loved, obviously, again, talking about the perfect confluence of like skills, passion, and timing. I mean, a gaming company, that uses neuroscience, that was my life. That was perfect. I couldn't have asked for, a more aligned profession or company to create or work for.
Wow. What a fascinating story of a guy who took years to figure out his own untapped potential. And it took moving and actually having a few core people believe in him for him to realize what he's capable of. Tune in next Wednesday to hear part 2 of this story of Wayne Mackey of Statespace, where you'll learn about how he was able to launch his company, what he learned about the truth and the difficulty of fundraising, and how he was able to grow his company in less than a year to hundreds of thousands of users. Tune in next week, and we'll see you on Sunday.